Welcome to the hot seat, my friend, the seat that always feels the heat, no topic too controversial. Today we have a guest who knows all too well what it means to be in the heat of a battle. Sall Grover, the founder of Giggle, a social networking app designed exclusively for women. Can you define a woman? You probably can. Can our leaders? Not really. But most. Giggle really was at the heart of one of the most significant legal battles in Australia. It's called Tickle versus Giggle. Now, I'm not making that up. That is the name. I don't know if you remember from the thick of it, the UK political comedy in which Mr. Tickle was quite the menace. Well, this Tickle is no different. In August 2024, the federal court ruled against Giggle, finding that the app indirectly discriminated against Roxanne Tickle, a transgender woman who was removed from the platform. Now, in a decision that stunned many, the court declared that sex is changeable, raising massive questions, of course, about the future of women-only spaces and sex-based rights. Now, Sall is appealing this ruling, arguing that it completely misinterprets the Sex Discrimination Act and could actually undermine sex-based protections for women and girls. But there's more to that. Crucially, there is a real human cost here. Tickle is now coming after Sall for legal costs. Now, that's huge. Because if Sall loses, she won't just lose a legal battle, it won't be a bruised ego. She'll be financially ruined. All for suggesting that this app should be exclusive to women, biological women, a fact and truth that we thought was immutable until only a few years ago. Imagine that. It's sick and it's twisted. So let's get into it, shall we? Sall Grover, welcome very much to the hot seat. Thank you for your company.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Now, listen, I think you're an absolute legend, but can we start with the basics for those that might not know? What inspired you to actually come up with Giggle in the first place? What made you think there needs to be this app that's exclusively for women? What was your vision, basically, for the app?
In a sense, I suppose it was kind of inspired by the Me Too movement. Like, whatever your thoughts are on that, I actually had experienced it. I was a screenwriter in Hollywood, and it's as much of a cesspool as everyone says it is.
Yeah.
And so I ended up going back to Australia and I was a very, very broken person from years of sexual assault and harassment. And I did a little bit of therapy just to sort of try and recover from it and get back to my normal self. And it was in that my therapist said, you really need a strong female support network in your life. And the moment she said it, it was this light bulb moment where I was like, I could think of all the different scenarios that would have actually either been helped or avoided if I'd had that. And so I was just talking to my mum one night. We were having a drink and going through it all. And she said, why don't we create an app for women, basically, so that, you have this sort of female support network in the palm of your hand, that no matter where you are or what you're doing in the world, there's sort of a female-only space available to you. And we it was only going to be a roommate app, basically, for women to find roommates and then create, basically have your own female in the space at home. And then we sort of started thinking of other things that women would want it for, and just sort of general conversation, lesbian dating, just emotional support, pregnancy, all those sorts of things that are either very specifically for women or just something that women would specifically need. And so we started developing it and getting ready to launch it. And then suddenly we were cancelled right out of the gate and thrust into this entire world where apparently men can be women. So in no way did we create it in response to what is happening. I didn't know about this. I'd never heard the word TERF before. Like when I was first called.
You definitely have now.
But I had to look it up. And it never even occurred to me when we were developing the platform to go and be like, oh, should I just go and check if men are considered women in law? And what an irrational thought that would have been. Yeah. You would never even naturally have the thought. So yeah, that's basically how we came up with it. And
was it basically like, I think of, when I think of the campaign for sex-based rights to be protected in the modern age, I think of Mumsnet. Now, I don't mean that I mean that in a a positive way. I think it's great for women to have their own space in which they can share ideas as women, as mothers, as all the rest of it that comes with your immutable sex. And that's fantastic, but it's derided and mocked as being this sort of turf hellhole. Do you think that's the sort of similar attempt that was your platform was immediately smeared as?
I think so. I think there was sort of a few differences. I mean, Mumsnet, it's a little. I mean, I love it, but Mumsnet's a little bit more open in the sense that
It's public,
you
yeah.
can go and read it, whatnot. What we had, what was a very closed network. So women, unless you were a woman, you couldn't even get on. You couldn't see anything in it.
Yeah.
We had gatekeeping at the onboarding stage of it, that so you could basically weed out men, and it was with AI. You take a selfie, the AI would sort of assess, because it can, like the good old fashioned human eye. They've basically made technology that replicates it, that can tell if someone's male or female, because it is incredibly obvious who is male and who is female. And then we also had humans behind the screens to back it up, because technology does make mistakes, and it did. I mean, men would get on and we would just remove them. And it's funny, when we were developing it, I actually didn't, the platform that I, in a sense, was using as some sort of inspiration wasn't anything else. It was women only. It was Grindr.
Yes.
For the reason that, when you have something that is for a specific demographic, whether it's gay men or women, it's called a niche social network. And so at the time, I didn't know that about gender ideology. So I didn't know that Grindr had actually opened itself up to who identifies as a gay man. But it was sort of one of the first social networks for a specific demographic. And we were like, well, obviously this was needed for gay men, so let's make something that's needed exclusively for women.
Which is fair enough. And you went to court because Tickle passed this allegation. And then, well, it's not an allegation. I mean, it was true. Tickle was kicked off of Giggle for being a man, right? That's ultimately... Yeah. That's the crux of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the allegation that I got from when I got the first Australian Human Rights Commission complaint from him was gender identity discrimination. But and I don't even remember removing him, because men did get on and we just removed them, and he was just one of them. So, I mean, I don't even know when it would have happened. But it wasn't about gender identity, sorry. It was about his maleness. He, obviously a male, and he was removed on the basis of being male. He wasn't removed on the basis of being trans. So to even say that it was gender identity discrimination is wrong. If you were to say anything, classified as anything, it was sex discrimination, but it was lawful sex discrimination, because the Sex Discrimination Act did, when it was working properly, allowed for women-only spaces, and you could remove a male person from them.
Now, the ruling that you received basically said, quite shockingly, as I said at the start there, that sex is changeable, right? Now, that is disturbing, what has been considered fact and truth for quite some time now. First of all, what do you make of that ruling ultimately? And secondly, in this country, even the Labour Party have stopped being so utterly deranged on this issue and have accepted sex-based rights and sex-based definitions, and that actually the Equality Act protects gender-critical views and all these other things. So we in this country, which is not the same in many other walks of life, by the way. In Australia, you are not as far gone as we are in so many respects. I could list a whole load. But is Anthony Albanese and the Labour Party over there, are they just totally lost on this issue? Has the culture war not been won there?
Oh, they're completely lost on this issue. What's happening in Australia at the moment is extreme censorship and political cowardice. So we have a federal election coming up within the next few months. It hasn't been established exactly when it will happen. It hasn't been called yet, but it will be very soon. And it appears both sides, the current government, which is the Albanese's Labor government, and then the opposition, which is Peter Dutton's Liberal Party, have no interest in taking up this issue. Just the other day, the current health minister, when asked about men and women's sports, just said, "Oh, there's no issue." You're like, but there is an issue, because I'm in court. And if there's no issue, we'll let the Australian Human Rights Commission know and stop dragging women through court, and let us have women-only spaces and women-only sport. But if you're not going to do that, then there is an issue. So, I mean, it's very, very frustrating. And it's one of my objectives at the moment is to put pressure on politicians to acknowledge reality, acknowledge that there is an issue, and actually do something about it. Because in Australia, the Sex Discrimination Act was actually changed in 2013 under Julia Gillard's Labor government.
Oh
Where
dear.
where gender identity was put into the Sex Discrimination Act, and the definitions of man and woman were removed. That's what created this whole mess. And legislators could actually fix this in a week, in a day, for free. But instead, I have to, work tirelessly every day to raise what is effectively going to be over $1 million by the end of this, to fight it out in the courts,
Wow.
so that I can move on with my life and not be accused of any form of discrimination, and run on app for women, but also get these amendments repealed. But if they were actually doing their job, they could just do it.
So, this ultimately then isn't about you, not really, right? This is about all Australian women, and actually the fight for truth and fact, for reality. Because it strikes me that this is a deeply ideological attack on you, right? That Roxanne Tickle isn't just suing. You've now revealed that actually he's coming after you for legal costs. If you lose, you'll of course be forced to pay his legal fees. Costs is what it's called in the legal trade. Now, for you personally, I don't know your financial situation, but it's going to be a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, like most people, I don't have millions of dollars just sitting around, especially just to pay for someone else's legal fees. No, I mean, we were always told throughout this process that his legal representation was pro bono. He had received a $50,000 grant from the Grata Fund, which is sort of a social justice sort of fund in Australia. But now, in this latest round in the appeal, they have decided and admitted that because I actually have been successful in crowdfunding the money, they want a piece of it.
Yeah.
And they want me to be able to pay his costs in the event that he wins in the next round. And the thing is that this is public interest litigation. I'm in a rights fight here. I want to. It's not just my own, as you said. It's all women's rights, but it's actually all citizens' rights, because I actually think that men, one, should also be able to have male-only spaces, but two, should also be able to acknowledge a man when they see one and not be forced to say that that's a woman. So everyone is actually impacted by this. But the other side, so I don't want to bankrupt him.
No.
Go and live your life. I wish you well. If you want to call yourself a woman, if you want to wear women's clothes, I really actually don't care that much.
Yeah.
I don't want to destroy your life. I'm here just to get women's rights back on track. The other side appears to want to punish me for successfully defending myself.
And is this
which people raising the money?
Has this, I mean, I completely agree with everything that you're doing. And, my heart, as I said to you off air, my heart goes out to you. I think you're a total hero and a force of nature. But it's all right for me to say this as a British gay man, but are there any feminist organisations or women's rights groups in Australia that have actually come out in a major way to actually support your case? Or is there an element of real intellectual cowardice there?
Oh, I mean, we definitely have some. So we've got Women's Forum Australia, which is run by Rachel Wong, which is just amazing. We've also Lesbian Action Group, which is another organisation in Australia that had applied to the Australian Human Rights Commission to have an exemption so they could have female-only lesbian events like there's any other kind. They were told no. So they have been incredibly supportive. But when you go to, say, sort of the more media-driven things, no. I mean, before we launched Giggle, when we were getting ready to, we never actually even got to properly launch it in any real way. We just had to sort of run with everything that was going on. But before it all happened, before I'd even been called transphobic, there's this media platform in Australia called Mamma Mia, and it sort of describes itself as Australia's largest woman media publication for women or something. And it's sort of like online news, and it's all very woman-centric. And they were so supportive, like, this is a slam dunk, this is a brilliant idea, we can't wait for this to be out, we're going to support you. The moment I was called transphobic, They've never once responded to an email from me again.
Cowards.
And I mean, I've sent so many emails to them over the years. I sort of stopped doing it because I was like, I mean, like, I felt,
Yeah.
well, you feel pathetic after a while, but
No, they should feel pathetic, not you.
no, I agree. And I also wanted the receipts that I was like, no, I emailed you at every single thing. I kept you up to date. I really did try to build a relationship with you, but they will not speak to me. And it's like, well, you've built your entire platform of knowing what a woman is, because I don't think 15 years ago or whatever, you were sitting there going, oh, definitely men or women. But now that there has been this sort of like bizarre cultural zeitgeist of it, they sort of went in that direction. And I find it unforgivable.
Yes. So for a British audience watching, right, I would argue that Julia Gillard is a progressive prat. Right, and I think that there is an element here, a bit like Penny Mordaunt, who was a minister here in our country, and she stood up at the dispatch box in Parliament in the House of Commons, and she said. She stood up and said trans women are women at the dispatch box, making a really, really public statement on camera, of course, and that went out. And they said self-identification is coming in. You can be whatever you want, call yourself whatever you want. And that had real ramifications for the Conservative Party and, of course, for legal fights. Maya Forstater, who I know you're aware of totally. And she won, of course, that really landmark case establishing rights and protections under the Equality Act. Now, where we're at here with the Sex Discrimination Act and the what I call the progressive prats is that they've put forward a piece of legislation and thought, aren't we worthy, aren't we good? And then it's had really wide ramifications, a bit like standing at a dispatch box and saying, you know, trans women are women, and not thinking through the consequences. But there is still this moral cowardice, isn't there, that says they're not willing to actually make an admission that they've made a mistake for fear of being called transphobic.
100%. I mean, when under Julia Gillard's government, when these amendments happened, it was the Attorney General at the time was a man named Mark Dreyfus, and he was very instrumental in getting gender identity into the Sex Discrimination Act. And because we have a Labour government again, it just so happens he's again right now the Attorney General. And so, I mean, do I think that this man will ever admit that he got it wrong? No. We all know he did. It's blatantly obvious. And looking back, when you can go and research the history of it, they didn't think about women at all when they did this. And you go, well, were they malicious or were they incompetent? Because as legislators, their job is actually to think of all of the different possibilities that can happen from legislation. I actually think that they were malicious. Mm-hmm. If they had just put in gender identity into the Sex Discrimination Act, you'd go, okay, maybe that was a little bit of a mistake. They just thought that it would work, and that just every now and then, like on the basis of gender identity, if there was a situation that was very removed from sex, I don't know what it would be, but let's just say that you could think of something, that there would be a protection there. But because they removed the definitions of man and woman, that makes me think that they knew exactly what they were doing. And so, again, I mean, it has to be fixed.
It's a history of the Attorney General having a history of this kind of activism.
I mean, I've not paid much more attention to him, to be honest, because of anything else that he's done, because I don't care about anything else he's done. This is enough for me.
Indeed.
To judge single thing about him. And no, I mean, he's someone who if the few times where he has sort of made a comment about the culture war, as they would call it, basically maintains that there's no problem.
Yeah, so dismisses it outright. Yeah. Well, speaking of dismissing it outright then, I want you to tell me, were you to speak to the Attorney General right now, he would argue that actually what he's done is in the name of equality. Well, actually, I would argue, Sall, that you have been subject to the rank misogyny of the worst kind and actually bullying on an industrial scale. And I hope that, you would be able to look him in the eye and tell him that, because he would deserve to hear it.
Oh, I'd tell him a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
I have played the conversation in my head. It's a big shower thoughts moment. No, without a doubt. I mean, the thing is that gender identity doesn't create less discrimination; it creates more, because when you're going to give men a privilege on the basis of gender identity, you're actually discriminating against women on the basis of sex. So, with gender ideology, actually everything about it, every claim that's made, everything that happens, the exact opposite is always true.
Mm,
And so, with this one, you can prove it here too. The person being discriminated against is me
yes.
on the basis of sex, vilified as well on the basis of sex. And it's sometimes psychologically hard to cope with that, in the sense you sit there going, I'm being punished for discrimination when I'm the one being discriminated against.
What would your, you know, you didn't expect yourself to be in this position, right? You've articulated that. What would your message be to young women who think, well, I don't want what happened to Sall to happen to me? You know, Sall's life has been turned upside down. She may face, you know, imminent multi-million dollar, sorry, bill. I'm in the wrong currency. And therefore, I don't want to put my head above the parapet. You know, you just said, without speaking out of turn, you just met Connie Shaw, we have on this channel, great girl. And she herself, a young student, she's only 20, and she had her life impacted because she said, basically, that, you know, sex is immutable and all these other things, and that you can't change your sex. And she was told as a student that she couldn't have a debating platform because she had the incorrect view on this very issue. So what would your message be to young women like that, who are looking at what's happening to women like yourself and thinking, I'm far too scared to voice what used to be thought of as a common sense view?
Yeah, I mean, I met Connie yesterday for the first time. I've been a fan of hers for the last few months since she was brought to my attention. And I mean, she's absolutely brilliant.
She's superb, yeah.
Gorgeous as well. She's
Yeah.
just fantastic. I didn't realize until recently that it was reading about Tickle v. Giggle is what, as we say, piqued her and made her go and research what was going on, because like any other rational person, she saw a picture of him and saw a man.
Yes.
And went, not a woman, so let's find out what's going on here. And so I met her yesterday because we had an event at the House of Lords, and I invited her to come. And we talked about it a lot, about young women and who might be scared. And I understand why they would be. It's rational. It's survival instinct. If you're seeing what's happening to the women speaking out, you think, well, what, I'm going to protect myself. I don't want that to happen. In the event that you can't speak out because it actually would damage your life, I do understand that. What the best thing you can do then is support the women who are.
Mm-hmm.
And you can or you can take the risk. I personally think that even if there is great cost, you take the risk. I mean, every single right we had, it took women taking the risk to get it. Like we were handed nothing.
Yeah.
We weren't even handed the right to vote. And even with if you look at the right to vote, there were even women then that were, say, against women getting the right to vote. Women have always fought for our rights in the face of opposition from a lot of men and just far too many women. But then we eventually fight hard enough when we get them. So I think you just have to sit there and ask yourself, like, you know, what would I have done in that situation? Would I have just not accepted, just accepted being a complete second-class citizen? Ask yourself now, like I couldn't sit back. I mean,
No.
in AHRC days, I mean, I could have just given in to all of the demands, but I mean, how do I sleep at night? How do I look at myself in the mirror? How do I look at my daughter? I have a 2.5-year-old daughter. How do I look at her in the eye and tell her to be strong and determined in life if I gave up when something was scary or got too hard? I mean, life is sort of just not just, it's a test to see how you react to some of these things.
And also, if this is allowed to mothball, your daughter's life is going to be severely impacted through policy.
100%. I can't send my daughter out into the world where she has no rights. She has to be able to say no to a man no matter what he thinks about himself. Mm-hmm. We all do.
Which goes back to the Me Too movement, really, right? So progressives have done a sort of reverse ferret where, we all came out and said, hashtag Me Too and all this other stuff, and Harvey Weinstein is an odious pig and all these other this other mantra, and now we're saying shut your mouth, bitch. You don't deserve to have an opinion. I can't think of how these two things are remotely compatible.
I have a theory. I think that there was a lot of people who didn't want the Me Too movement to happen, and there was some crazy elements to it. Don't get me wrong. Like I will sit there and have conversations about and criticize Me Too along with everybody else. But the core principle of it was incredibly important, and it was a grassroots movement of women that was getting a lot of traction. I don't think that it's any coincidence that a movement of women having boundaries was very quickly replaced by a woman having boundaries as a bigot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's a lot of powerful people in media, in politics, fields like that, who really didn't want to get, let's say, Me Too'd, and took it away as quickly as possible,
right.
and found a way to silence any woman who actually does care about boundaries and safeguarding and reality and facts.
Will Giggle ever launch?
Yes, 100%. Oh gosh, yeah, 100%. I mean, while obviously I'm doing this because I want rights in general, I do always remember like the first principle of how I got here. And, I'm not giving up. I think actually, if anything, female-only spaces have become more important since I first had the idea. I mean, they weren't front page news in any way, shape, or form. I didn't know that they were controversial. I mean, female spaces everywhere at one point. And male-only, I just didn't think that this was controversial at all. And so, yeah, no, definitely. We will definitely be relaunching, and it will be very exciting when we do. I can't wait till my days are filled with just actually running a woman-only app rather than having to, I don't know, walk around and tell people what a woman is while holding like a paper cup, saying, "Please give me money." Like, you feel like a crazy person.
No, it needs to happen. It's so important. Speaking of that appeal, then, that you are raising funds for, what is the latest on both of those things, as in the appeal and the fund itself? What arguments are being put forward in the appeal, and when can we expect the appeal to take place?
So we actually had the first case management hearing for it yesterday. And then so the next time we're in court, it's called an interlocutory hearing, which will be on the 7th of April. And that's when they're going to talk about costs. Right. It's going to be fought then. Also, there's a few different organizations that want to intervene. So, for example, the Australian Human Rights Commission wants to intervene again on Tickle's side, on the side of gender identity. The Australian Christian Lobby has applied to intervene on my side, as hopefully the Lesbian Action Group will also be doing that. So, sort of these strange bedfellows of who sort of the Christians, the lesbians, we're all coming together for the greater cause of women's rights and reality. And the hearing itself will be in August. Then we'll probably get a decision, hopefully by the end of the year. And then the next stage is the High Court. So we've always known that this case will probably go to the High Court. So if I lose this round, which I really hope I don't, but if I do, I will be the one taking it to the High Court. If I win this round, I fully expect the other side would take it to the High Court. Mm-hmm. So I'm prepared for that. I know that I'm just midway through the marathon, basically. And so for anyone who does want information about like the legal arguments or the laws, or just to understand it more, it is at the crowdfund, so gigglecrowdfund.com. There's all information about it, news. I mean, any updates, we update after there are hearings, because on a day-to-day basis, obviously, there's nothing specific. I mean, we don't sit there and do updates like another legal letter was sent. Like, we're not that good with the updates. But when there are big things that do happen, we update everybody. And it's just, I mean, I've said from day one, I'll fight this till the end.
And I
will win. By the end, I think I will win.
An international audience can make a donation.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I was able to do the first round, which was just over $500,000, from the kindness and support of people from all over the world who either care about women's rights or free speech, freedom of belief, just reality of just don't want to live in like some sort of bizarre version of Orwell's 1984. And so I'm so grateful. I will be grateful for the rest of my life. And all I can say to repay everybody is that I will never, ever give up.
Beautifully said. I wish you all the very best. I really do. Best of luck. And you deserve all of that and more. So I'm so pleased that people are seeing this and actually being supportive of it, because it's not just, as we've said, it's not just about you. It's not just about women. This is actually about where we're at in the Western world, I would argue. You know, it's sort of civilizational.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You know, if the state can make you accept men as women, well, they can force you to accept anything, can't they?
Yeah.
What's next? Where does it go from there? I mean, you have to be able to have, you know, your freedom of belief, freedom of mind, freedom of speech, freedom of association. These are all like the foundations of a healthy and liberal society, and they are at what is at stake, and we have to fight for them. Unfortunately, but we have to fight for them.
Indeed. Right, Sal, that website again, give it one more time.
GiggleCrowdfund.com.
Perfect. Sal, best of luck. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.